two remarkable women, one who's very young and one who is moving into later midlife, collaborating with a remarkable man for his time. We're talking the 19th century, and for Father Chaminade to recognize their gifts and to draw those gifts out in all kinds of ways and to really function as collaborators. I just think this is a story that can really be important to people. So I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Speaking from my perspective as a layperson, being included, invited, empowered to really be part of the Marianist family, to really own certain aspects of it, is part of what connected me to these women and to their story.
Just to note the comments that I get from people saying, well, why haven't we heard as much about the women collaborators? And certainly Father Chaminade has taken center stage, and I'm really glad we're in a time when the women collaborators are also being centered in the story for the contributions that they've made to the Marianist family.
I remember being in Puerto Rico, in San Juan, teaching at Colegio, a Marianist high school. Just the hint of mentioning Adèle and Marie Thérèse was such a new concept and a new idea that I remember wanting to really explore how their contribution could be so impactful for the school community, for so many people.
In this episode of Sharing Our Marianist Stories, we're stepping back into 19th century France to meet three unlikely collaborators who'd redefined what it means to be a family of faith and reflect on their relevance for us in the 21st century. You know the name Father William Joseph Chaminade, but the Marianist story is incomplete without two remarkable women who collaborated with him: the young-spirited Adèle de Batz de Trenquelléon and the practical, courageous Marie Thérèse de Lamourous. From escaping the French Revolution to running cigar-making missions for the poor, NACMS staff members Sister Laura Leming and Jessica González Uhlig explore how these three founders use their unique gifts of head, heart, and hands to build a movement that still thrives today. Let's dive in.
When students read the little yellow book about Adèle,
Sister Laura is referring to Father Joe Stefanelli's book, Adèle, Aristocrat for the Poor, an easy-to-read 25-page introduction to Adèle, available in the NACMS bookstore on our website.
I'm always struck by how amazed and surprised and intrigued they are by a couple of things in particular. One is how young she was and how strong her quest for holiness was, and trying to really discern what is the best life path for me. Students identify with that. They say, oh, she was like a young person. She was 17, 18 when she said some of these things. And the second thing is that she gave up a relatively wealthy background to pursue her vision of a life of service. And that kind of dedication is something that is really impressive, especially for young people today who are trying to find their own path and trying to find their own authentic expression of prayer.
Then there are the students that have this deep, almost mystical way about themselves, and they feel like that's not cool or that's not on trend to have a young woman unapologetically faithful and pretty clear. Because from what I know about Adèle, she certainly didn't seem to hesitate much. She was just so sure of what she was sensing, what her life should look like.
At the same time, when she's pursuing this path of holiness, she understood that it had to be with other people. Friendship was a driving force for Adèle. And you see it all through her life. Her friendship initially with Jean Duché and Agathe, she had a lifelong friendship with. in the gathering not only women, but priests in the area and seminarians who chose to be part of what she called the association, the gathering of people who joined with her in this quest for holiness and service, especially service to the poor, and her friendship with Saint Emily Rodin, who was a foundress herself later in life. Adèle and she corresponded, and there was some thought maybe someday that they should join forces, that the women that they worked with could join together, and that didn't work out. But even after that didn't work out, Adèle and Saint Emily continued to correspond and talk about the challenges of founding a group for the purpose of service and holiness, and realistically preparing for a happy death, because so many people that they knew in an age before antibiotics didn't have long lives. They couldn't really expect to have long lives. And so all of that friendship as a driving force is something I really see her as modeling that path to holiness.
And if there's serious illness, then it only had one result: to be able to be accepting of that. Acceptance sometimes is really hard. It's a big, big challenge. So having role models like Adèle on just looking at life with some sort of level of acceptance. For me, picking two aspects of Marie Thérèse, the moment when she's invited to work, to support, to be around women that had been working on the streets, they had gone into prostitution because of the circumstances of the time. And she hesitated. She struggled with that because her moral compass was such that that was just not part of her upbringing. Those were bad decisions, period.
I think I learned the phrase from you, but it's one that I've used often, is nothing in her life prepared her for this.
Exactly.
You know?
Nothing. And she was the eldest of 11 children. She pretty much had to take over and run the farm. She learned a lot from her mom. She learned some from her dad, but they were pretty much just non-existent, and she raised her siblings, etc. So it's not like she had had an easy life necessarily. The story is she was asleep, she woke up, she had had this vision, this dream of the women crying out her name and pretty much asking for her to come and help them and to support them and be with them. And that's incredible on its own. I mean, it's when we have those moments of, wait a minute, I believed this, but then something happens. Or you meet someone and you have a conversation and you really have that opportunity to dialogue, maybe internally, and change your mind or change the direction of where you're going. For that to be so impactful in her life that it completely redirected her vocation and her mission working with these women. And then, of course, what she did with the women of loving them openly and being there for them, but also giving them that power to decide, you're here and we welcome you, right? I welcome you with open arms, but you have to do the work. There is discipline, there is structure. And when you're not up to that, or when you feel that this is nothing for you, there's the door, basically. You can leave on your own. So that made her so real. And I think it's timely, and it's something that we see and that we need today.
Even before the Miséricorde, she experienced transformation. She was somebody who was a little nervous about doing the right thing and how things were going to work out. And I think she was somebody who struggled with whether God really loved her and accepted her. We see that in her sort of fearfulness about, was she too concerned about doing the wrong thing? And yet she ends up being this person who does astounding things during the Reign of Terror, like dressing up as a housekeeper so that she can work in the police station and get a glance at who was on the list of emigres so that she could warn them that they were about to be picked up by the police. And that just is amazing to me.
Miséricorde refers to the house of repentant prostitutes which Marie Thérèse ran in Bordeaux. More on that to come. Émigrés were those who fled France in an effort to escape the political turmoil and upheaval of the French Revolution.
One of the quotes that I found as we were getting ready for this conversation that I just think says volumes about her. On a retreat that she was at, she says, "Our perfection depends upon our ordinary actions." She responded to what was needed at the time, whatever that was, whether it was, okay, I'm going to go put my little cap on and go into the police station and clean the desks so that I can see what's there. Once she's at the misericord and she needs to find ways that the women can earn enough money to run the household. I mean, there were a whole bunch of people. It was so many, and you have to feed those people. And so they did lace making, they took in laundry, they even made cigars because they had access to good tobacco, and they were known as the Mademoiselle de Lamourous cigars. People would come to Bordeaux and pick up cigars from them.
And without making a fuss. It's the quintessential sense of doing the right thing or just doing something to address the needs of what was happening.
And then we get to the collaboration between them. Marie Thérèse was a lifelong, first she was someone who Father Chaminade directed spiritually. He learned to see her capacity to help. And Adèle was this young woman that Father Chaminade had been in touch with, heard about what she was doing in the countryside. She hears about what this priest in Bordeaux is doing, and they are able to be in touch and share their hopes and visions so that when Father Chaminade needs someone to work with Adèle and the young women who start the foundation, who naturally to send to spend time with them in their first weeks of living in a household together, trying out religious life, but Marie Thérèse. She could give Chaminade a much clearer picture of Adèle's capacity to lead the group.
Just putting that trust in Marie Thérèse to go in and get a feel for what that's going to look like is a great example of the beginnings of that collaboration, including Adèle. Certainly that partnership with Marie Thérèse and Father Chaminade was already established. And then the endorsement of Adèle, Marie Thérèse is just instrumental.
Marie Thérèse was literally sent by Chaminade to help him make sure that Adèle would be the best director of this group. The question was she grounded enough? Was she solid enough? We have to remember that Adèle sort of had a flair for the dramatic. Even as a child, she and her mother and brother are escaping Agen when they were on the list of émigrés. She was yelling out the door of the coach, "We're being kidnapped." She had a certain flair for drama, and I'm not sure how much Chaminade at that point really knows about that, but he certainly recognizes that this is the next step in this big project, which is our Marianist family today, right? So this is taking a big leap, and he needs to make sure that we have the best leaders we can have. So having Marie Thérèse live with Adèle for a number of weeks to say, is she going to be able to do this? The fact that Father Chaminade entrusted this mission, sort of the fruition of what he wanted to see happen, to these two women, one so young, one his age or a little bit older than he was, that says volumes about how our beginnings of a Marianist family lead us to a different kind of vision about who can lead, how does it happen, and the power of sometimes ordinary connections and things that seem serendipitous might actually be a path of grace.
And with Father Chaminade, just inviting, building this relationship, being open and treating them as equals to a degree, right? It is a foundation to be looked at today. To have Marie Thérèse trust this young woman is that quintessential mentor-mentee relationship. Sometimes we say that students don't know what their capacity is until somebody says so. They may not believe in themselves until someone notices that spark And I see that in Marie Thérèse with Adèle, and certainly made it a point to Father Chaminade to completely and utterly trust her in the foundation of the FMI.
FMI references the acronym for the Daughters of Mary Immaculate, the Marianist Sisters. It stands for the French Filles de Marie Immaculée.
Right. And then Adèle often talks about our good mother in her letter writing to her own sisters. And she's not just talking about Mary, she's talking about Marie Thérèse, the good father and the good mother, who are people who are looking out for us and that we have learned from. Because the work that Marie Thérèse was doing was certainly something that Adèle admired and wanted to figure out what were the ways that they, within religious life, could reach out in ways that responded to urgent needs of the time.
And certainly stressing the reality of how not every day was easy and not everything came naturally. We believe to a certain degree that some things did because of their faith. In terms of their realness, I connect their story, particularly Marie Thérèse's story. I've spoken to a number of groups of college-age students, and I often say, think of that time when you were assigned to work in a group. They have to give a group presentation, but it's with other people that you don't know. And oftentimes that initial gut reaction is, uh-oh, I don't know how they're going to work. I don't know them at all. How can I trust that my grade will be fairly judged? It takes those moments of, let's have a conversation, let's spend time together, let's build some sort of community in order to see the gifts that each of us bring to a group. On a personal note, 3 of us who were in our doctoral program together, each of us had a different strength. One was the organizer. Whenever we had a group project, that the outline was ready, I offered to take care of the content. I like to write, and I was like, no problem. The third person, we called her the closer. She was so good at editing and putting the presentation together and all the bells and whistles and just making it pretty. So the 3 of us just clicked in such a way. We looked at the project from very different angles, but each was willing to do it that way. And I always compare that to the way these 3 founders came together. And I use that example to students to give themselves and their classmates that moment of grace to explore the possibilities of what that group project could look like. Again, it may not always be perfect, but walk in with that openness.
And it almost always is better than it would have been.
Certainly for Marie Thérèse, a lot of folks speak about just having that sense of prayer and that deep faith and just believe and trust that things are going to work out. I know it sounds Pollyanna-ish, but we are people of faith and we do believe and we pray. But Marie Thérèse was known almost as the manager of the Miséricorde, and seeing that responsibility, the fiscal responsibility, we have to pay the bills, the practicality of it.
Food today.
Exactly.
And so she goes and knocks on the tabernacle and says, "Your daughters are hungry." And lo and behold, within a couple of hours, somebody shows up at the door with a bag of bread, you know?
Exactly. So there's something to say about the power of prayer and deep faith that things are going to work out.
And trust in providence.
That's right. That's right.
Later in Father Chaminade's life, he's going to say, I worked with what God gave me, with these men who surrounded him later to begin the Society of Mary. So there's this trust in providence, and yet there's a practicality on their part to say, who has the best gifts for this? And then the continued conversation and Adèle looking to Marie Thérèse as a guide for their young community, I think is something that we see.
When we talk about what they represent to us, and especially in the way that they acted, we talk about head, heart, and hands. And I always see that Father Chaminade was the head. Not that the women were not visionaries, but when it comes to the Marianist family, the visionary was Father Chaminade. And then I always say that Adèle was the heart, because Adèle, in her compassion and her work for the poor, but again, that unconditional faith, and even to a degree, as you said, that flair for the dramatic. It's all emotion. So she's the heart. And then the hands are, Marie Thérèse was like, let's just get this done. Let's get literally our hands dirty, working with serving, ministering, putting her life in danger. Talk about walking the talk. And then look at the connection. The heart and the hands go together. We do what we love what we do, and we have this sense of purpose and feeling, and we know we need to do something about it. So talk about a beautiful connection there.
They were a little bit more on the active side than Father Chaminade. As
For
a matter of
sure.
fact, Adèle had to really push Father Chaminade to be more serious about the foundation of the FMIs, because he was busy with the Bordeaux sodality and all the pieces that had.
Right.
And she finally said to him, if you can't help us lay out the structure for this, we'll find somebody else to do that, because we want to
Yes.
move on this.
That's right.
And so pushing him a little bit. And yet Adèle always recognized her own limitations.
By Bordeaux sodality, Sister Laura is referring to the first community that Father Chaminade formed in Bordeaux, which consisted of lay people, some of whom would eventually pursue vowed religious life as the first members of the Society of Mary.
Everybody's favorite quote is, "My heart, O God, is too small to love you. So I will make you loved by so many other hearts that their love will make up for the littleness of mine." That just is so characteristic, especially as you talk about Adèle as the heart. She had this passion for loving God and loving others in a way that would give honor to God, point to God's goodness and grace.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sharing Our Marianist Stories, a production of the North American Center for Marianist Studies in Dayton, Ohio. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on social media at This Is NACMS. I'm Mike Bennett, Media Administrator for NACMS.